So I'm curious too, because I know you had some firsthand experience about you actually discovered a solution to your wife's health challenges. I'm curious how
Mhm.
that came about, and I guess like how a lot of that learning experience you've had has changed your viewpoint and how you look at health.
Yeah, I mean, that was a profoundly difficult situation. Just after having our fourth child, we got into a car accident.
My
And
gosh.
for those of you who know much about the chronic disease, and especially things like Lyme disease, is that it can kind of sit dormant in the body and kind of be lurking in the corners. And an
From
event,
someone that has Epstein-Barr, I totally understand.
yeah, so that is something too. So
Hmm.
if someone with Epstein-Barr, Lyme, or another condition, even MS, they get into a situation that is highly stressful, like a car accident, where the hormones shift and you have a big cascade of adrenaline kick in over time, the body can kind of become more vulnerable. And so when that adrenaline drops after a few weeks, the onset for my wife looked like a flu. And then it was like, wow, this has been a week. And then it just kind of kept going. And so this path to discovery, I mean, we went down all of the normal pathways, being that, I definitely have some expertise in some of these areas, but this is also, my wife, and we have a newborn. And so I'm thinking, okay,
Sure.
let's try every specialist. And, we went through the ringer, spent a lot of money in 9 months while she was bedridden. And then it was kind of like, okay, maybe I need to start looking at this the way I look at everything else, and look at what's been accumulating in the body due to stress, and started to call on my mentors and teachers. And through that process, we recognized that Lyme works just like any other chronic disease, whether it's cancer or MS, and that there's sort of a substrate or a foundation in the body that's being built while the body is stressed and not keeping up. And that's what these dysbiotic organisms like the spirochetes in Lyme are utilizing to colonize and to sort of take control of your body in a sense. And so I was just able to kind of create a synthesis between what many different streams of my teachers were telling me, and start to work out a plan and a way to sort of first address the body, get it out of a stress state, and then start to look at, well, what would be an irrefusable food for these organisms, and how would we break into their secret colonies, because they use things called neoplasms and cofactors to keep themselves discrete from your immune system while they're working. So I was able to discover process with some great guides, and we had great success, and we've been able to share that success with many others along the way since.
So you've really grabbed my attention, Jeffrey, like looking at stress. Cause I think we have such a basic understanding of stress, right? Like we look at it and we're like, oh man, I'm just so stressed out, or I'm drinking too much coffee and my adrenals don't like me, or whatever it is. And I guess when you look at it, like, how does stress actually work, and what are the things it's doing to the body? Cause I don't think a lot of people take that for granted because we just don't know.
Totally. And you're spot on. And the way stress has been really viewed in our world is kind of this mental thing, like my job is
Yeah.
stressful, but there's an actual neurophysiology of stress. And so what that means is stress isn't just something that happens to you, inside of you. In order to be in a stress state, it's very akin to the fight or flight state. So what that means is that whenever we're feeling threatened, or we're feeling inadequate to meet the demands of our life, we have this non-specific response, which is that the brain lateralizes into one hemisphere and goes back into a more primitive part of our brain. Those primitive parts of our brain are fantastic at getting us through survival situations where we're truly in a threatening situation, like a bear or tiger, right? We've been really well adapted to those simple stresses. So the way the system is designed is that the brain goes, okay, here's a threat. Let's go back into that primitive part of our brain. Let's put blood flow and oxygen to our limbs so that we can fight off the bear, or run from the bear, or freeze and protect ourselves from that bear. And in those situations with a bear or a tiger, there's a clear beginning and a clear ending. So the bears, we either make it or we don't. And we
Right.
usually know that in a matter of minutes, 20, 30 minutes tops. And so at that point, the brain goes, oh, okay, everything's okay, and comes back into normal human level function. What's going on with us is that stress that we're well adapted to, the simple stress, We don't have that kind of stress so much anymore in our lives, rarely, but we do
It's
have
so
modern.
interesting because like the thing I just got
Yeah.
is it's almost like a state of stress, right? Like it's
Yeah.
kind of never. You're talking about like when it's a lion or something like that. Like there's a beginning, a middle, and end. It's right. And I
Yep.
think for a lot of us, we're living in a state of stress, right? Like a lot of our stressors don't go away. We learn how to function with them.
Yeah. Like you just nailed it. Like there's many beginnings, like your boss, your bills, the traffic, the media, all those things,
Sure.
they just keep beginning and there's no clear ending. But for some reason, the way we haven't adapted to them, so they trigger that same response as if it were a bear, but the bear never goes away. So to understand how it's a causal factor to almost all disease is to understand that when we're in that state of survival and the blood flow and oxygen is in our limbs, guess what's not working and not getting full innervation, which is the energy of the nervous system, your immune system, your digestive system, your tissue repair, your cell function and replication. So all of that is on the back burner because your brain is really smart. And it's like, if I don't beat this bear right now, none of that stuff matters, right? So you're
Right.
not going to prioritize those things. So the number one priority in addressing any of our challenges when it comes to our health is to first get us out of that stress state so that the body's innate intelligence can start doing what it already knows how to do.
So then I guess like looking at that then this is so interesting. Like I guess looking at it then like you mentioned kind of your expertise and how it crosses with your training and everything else. Like, so I guess what do you do to change that then? Like what things do you do to change that condition? Because obviously there's no bear there, but we think there's a bear there and we're operating like there's a bear there. So like what things do you do to let the body know like, hey, there is no bear there. We should do things differently. Like, how do you do that?
Yeah. Well, all of us are becoming more aware of things like meditation, things like yoga. Those are all great systems that have worked for us humans for a long time. And qigong, tai chi, even exercise can be the right kind of exercise. Walking, right, in nature, those things can all help change the body, the brain state out of the stress state. Massage, for instance, acupuncture, all those things are fantastic, but they're sort of slow shifts out of that state. And we typically will drop right back into that stress state when we're done. So what I've focused on is there's a hands-on modality, which is called Alphabiotics. And that is a way that stimulates the main nerve ganglion on the back of the head that communicates directly to the brain, that part of the brain that is stuck in stress. And so it's like sending a signal saying, hey, to the brain, and the brain in less than half a second is able to scan its body, scan the environment and go, oh, there's no bear. So there's kind of like a reboot switch on your body. And so that's one of the ways, if you're fortunate enough to find someone who can do that technique. The other way is really to utilize gross motor movement. So because every time a stress state happens, it's always a one-sided thing. So we call it brain lateralization. The cool thing about our bodies is that our brain, if our left hemisphere controls our right side of our body and vice versa, right hemisphere controls the left side, there's types of movement that cross the midline. And that what that does, if you do it regularly enough over a course of a few minutes, is it gets the two hemispheres of the brain to start talking. And they're starting to share information and bounce it back off of each other. And then they recognize that there isn't really a bear. And it starts to shift that brain function, which then the body follows suit. And tight muscles relax, weak ones turn back on, and we get greater balance, which means we have access to that part of our brain that does the repair.
So I guess what about like when you're looking at kind of your daily activity level and like your things you do every day, like once you kind of start getting a better understanding of this, how does this change your daily operation, right? Like I'm curious on that. Like how does that change how you kind of start every day and go through every day? Because I'm sure you're going to do it differently, once you have this data.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the coolest things about our bodies is as we wake up every morning, I think probably at this point, most people reach for their phone, right? But what's
I'm
happening
guilty.
on a brainwave level is that our brains naturally slow down at night. So the stressed person doesn't get as much deep sleep as we need. Sleep is obviously a massive factor. It's where most of our healing happens, most of the repair happens, the digestion and elimination happens. So the brain's supposed to naturally slow down at night, and then it's going to naturally speed back up. So if you can work with your breath, for instance, and slow that breath really down, really slow it down, you can alter your state just like that. But there's
What
this really
about
cool.
like other environmental factors too? Like, are you somebody that says like, hey, turn the Wi-Fi off at night and stuff like that as well? Like, are those things we should be looking at?
Totally. If you're sensitive like that, I would highly recommend turning off the Wi-Fi. But even a more easy one for most people is to really make it dark in their room where they're sleeping and cool out, have the temperature below 70 degrees. Both of those are helpful environmental cues to the body to slow down the brain waves, to get down into that deep delta rest, which is where the healing happens. And then when you're waking up in the morning, you're in a called a theta alpha state, and those are both brain waves as they're speeding back up, and they're very
Right.
suggestible, meaning great time to meditate, great time to say out loud what it is you actually want to experience in your life, what it is you want to feel, because you're in this kind of more programmable, suggestible state. And instead of going straight to the phone, which has blue light, and that blue light is going to quickly elevate those brain waves right up to beta, which is kind of what most people are operating in during the day, which is also the stress brain waves.